Using variation in the wrong way might actually be the thing that's making your track sound like a loop. So how is it that some tracks can be super repetitive but never really feel loopy? You know what I mean? Like this, for example. Very repetitive, right? Or this one. These tracks are very repetitive, but they don't feel loopy. They feel kind of endless. And if you understand the mechanism at play, although it kind of feels backwards, you can apply it to your music no matter the genre. I want to show you how. So this topic came from a few different producers that were kind of asking me similar questions, and I want to show you a student's project in a moment. But first, I want to take you through a little demonstration of what makes a track sound loopy in the first place, because it's very easy to overlook. So I want to do something a little bit different today. I'm showing you some slides from my coaching program, Play It Loud, and this is a diagram of a 2-bar loop. And what I'm trying to say in this diagram is the drums are repeating on a 2-bar length, the bass line's repeating on a 2-bar length, and so is the synths. Everything is 2 bars. If I show you what that looks like, this is a 4-bar loop, but essentially it's the same thing. We've got the drums and the bass line and everything, even this organ, it's all repeating on a 4-bar loop. Have a listen. And so if we take this hypothetical 2-bar loop here, and if we repeat it over and over, we duplicate it out, it still sounds like a 2-bar loop. So then what happens at this point is you start making variations. So let's say this is the bass line or the kick drum. Let's shorten this element. Maybe this is the synths and I can extend this out. And so we're making some variations to break the loop. But even though I'm making variations, it still sounds loopy because of these boundaries here. Specifically, if you make some sort of variation over here, duplicate out the loop like this, what we're doing is we're duplicating out all of the variation as well. Whilst it is creating variation, this can also have the opposite effect. So if I was to take the drums and remove variation, split it in half and make it more loopy, and then do it again, and then do it again. If I was to then duplicate that over and zoom out, now the drums and the bass here are more repetitive, but the crucial difference is that if I make one slow change over the course of time, then this no longer feels repetitive and it feels endless. It's repetitive to the point where it doesn't feel like it's repeating. Because when you have lots of variation like this, your ear catches onto the boundaries and it knows, hey, this is a 4-bar loop. So because there's less variation, your ear has nothing to grab onto as a boundary. And you're probably already familiar with this concept in terms of how sound and oscillators work. So these pads, what I did here was I bounced it and then put it into a sampler. As I reduce the length of the loop, it slowly gets more repetitive until the point where it no longer feels like a loop and it just becomes a tone. If I was to then add some slow movement to this, it's no longer a loop, it's an endless sound. Now this is just an example to explain the concept, but it's the same thing as what's going on here. We repeat it more often, make some slow movement changes, and it becomes endless. Now what I can do is I can increase the length of this synth loop, and what's happening here is our track is working together as one whole unit. We've got a solid and repetitive foundation, and we're getting the variation from the synths. And this is how progressive music works. A very repetitive foundation, we might have some movement in the drums going up and down, and then we just have like one slowly changing element, and then another slowly changing element, and that can be it. The movements are slower, and we can get away with being more repetitive over the course of time. But what can we learn from this? Because you might not be making progressive music. You might be like, Luca, this only applies to the style of music that you're talking about. So I want to show you the mechanism here. There's 2 main points that I want to cover. So to explain this first point, I want to show you this example. This is a track from a student that I was working with. We were trying to dive into what was making this feel a little bit loopy. Let's just have a listen first. So so the first thing that I really noticed here was these pad notes, the movement here. We've got these 3 notes and they're looping on this 4-bar length. So what we could do to hide the movement is we can create another option here. And on this one, I just looped the first note over, made it more repetitive. What I also noticed was the kick drum here is a 2-bar loop as well. We're making some variation in the kick drum, which is making it feel like a 2-bar loop. So instead, what I'm going to do is just loop this over. So it's just every quarter. So now I've technically made the track more repetitive, but have a listen to how it emphasizes this melody here, because the background supporting elements are more endless. And so this first point is trying to think about our track in terms of roles. It's kind of like a sports team. If every member on the team is doing the exact same thing, then it's not a very good team. If everyone's good at different things, then you can support each other. And this is the exact same thing. If I have less repetition in some other elements, then the things that are creating the variation are being supported and emphasized. So that's this takeaway number 1, thinking about our track in terms of roles. We can have a solid foundation, we can have repetitive action over here, and then we can have variation in the elements that you want to create variation with. You don't have to create variation in every single element, but just specific ones. And this is what allows you to have a really highly repetitive track that has some things on top that are slowly moving. Let's just go back to our examples at the start of the video. This one's a really good one for what I'm talking about, because the drums and the bass and the synths are all doing very repetitive stuff, but then there's these pads, these huge pads on top that are slowly moving. Let's just have a listen. You can see that that style of track is kind of akin to something like this. All the variation is coming from the synths. Point number 2 that I wanted to make with this is a spectrum, right? This isn't a hard and fast rule. I'm not saying that this is the way that you should do it, but you can use and take this and apply it to particular parts of your track. On this side, we have more structured style arrangements. They're blocky. We've got specific designed sections for each part of the arrangement. They might have higher contrast moments. They're generally moving faster, and because they're moving faster, we can use more elements. On the progressive end of the spectrum, things are more repetitive, they're more smooth, and because the movements are slower over time, you can get away with using less elements. And this is a diagram of more structured style arrangement. You have more defined sections, we have things building up. This is where you would have longer loop lengths, and you do have more reliance on creating variation, and you generally need to have more options with bringing things in and taking things out. And I want to show you this example here because this is a more structured style track in a similar genre. Listen to the loop lengths and the melodies and where it's repeating. It's a lot more blocky and structured. Has much more defined sections. You can see how this style of music sits on the traditional songwriting end of the spectrum. So how you do this in your music and what you take from each side of the spectrum is entirely up to you. In fact, it needs to be up to you to decide what that is. So if you want help figuring out your process and how this works for you, you can check out Play It Loud in the description. I also have a free 3-day email course which takes you through every step of my process over the course of 3 days, and you can take that and adapt it to yourself. I hope this has been helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.